Hello and welcome back to Mystery of Israel Radio. I'm Tom Quinlan, your host. I can be reached at tomquinlan@zionchristianpress.org, and archives of these messages can be found at zionchristianpress.org/radio. Today we're going to continue our trek through the book of Daniel as directed by Jesus. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, let the reader understand. From Matthew 24. So we're picking up in chapter 11, verse 31, which actually mentions this abomination that causes desolation. It says, "His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. With flattery he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant. But the people who know their God will firmly resist him." King James says, "The people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by spoil many days. Now when they shall fall, they shall be helped with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for an appointed time. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak unheard of things against the God of gods, and shall prosper, be successful, until the indignation be accomplished. For that which is determined shall be done." Verse 37, "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate he shall honor the God of fortresses, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with the strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many." Verse 39, "He will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god, and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. He will make them rulers over many people, and will distribute the land at a price. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come at him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen, with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, into Israel, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. He will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape." Verse 43, "But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly, or to annihilate many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. And yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him." Just like that. He shall come to his end, and none shall help him. And so chapter 12 is going over this again. says, and at that time shall Michael stand up. While all this is taking place, Michael shall stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of your people, Daniel. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was, since there was a nation, even to that same time. So I believe this verse is talking about the trouble that we just read about, from the abomination that causes desolation up until the end of this vile person. There shall be a time of trouble such as never was, since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. That's the resurrection of the dead. And so these events are inextricably tied to the resurrection of the dead and the restoration of Daniel's people. Anything that looks like this at all. Last week we talked about a partial fulfillment 150 to 200 years before Christ in the person of Antiochus Epiphanes. But some people will tell you that this was fulfilled after Christ in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed the temple and the sacrifice was stopped and is still stopped today. But what I'm saying is that unless all these things are fulfilled, up to and including the restoration of Daniel's people and the resurrection of the dead, which last week we covered in 1 Thessalonians 4, also includes the return of the Lord and the rapture of the church. Remember, just going to read it again. And we should also combine this with Matthew 24. But I'm going to 1 Thessalonians 4. It doesn't hurt to read these things again. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, not quietly, with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. And the dead in Christ shall rise first. Line that up with Daniel chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And at that time shall thy people be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. The dead in Christ shall rise first. They line up together here. Then, 1 Thessalonians 4:17, then the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. I'm flipping over also to Matthew chapter 24, which actually sent us to the book of Daniel, when he said, when you see the abomination that causes desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, let the reader understand. That was verse 15, chapter 24, verse 15. Verse 16, then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let them which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. Pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then, when you see the abomination, then let them flee. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Unequaled tribulation. Compare that to Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which stands for the children of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time, unequaled trouble. Matthew 24, verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. I want to jump on down to verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. This all goes together with what we just read in Daniel chapter 11. From the abomination that causes desolation up until his end, the end of the evil king, which is marked by this: the restoration of Daniel's people, the resurrection of the dead, and this: immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. That sounds a lot like 1 Thessalonians 4, doesn't it? I'm just going to read it one more time. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God, the last trump. And the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. One last verse for today. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15. This is talking about the same events. It says in chapter 15, verse 51, Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, we shall not all die, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. At the sound of the trumpet, the last trumpet, the dead in Christ shall rise, and then we which remain shall be caught up together with them. Comfort one another with these words. Until next time, this is Mystery of Israel Radio.